I'm Kristen Plummer. I work for KVCAP in Somerset County. Oh, there you are, Mike. Sorry, that distracted me. For the Child Abuse and Neglect Council. So for folks who attended our last session, we sort of ended with a short conversation on resilience, and I wanted to bring us back to that conversation and dive a little bit deeper into what resilience looks like and how, as community providers, we can work with folks to promote resilience. So my slideshow is it's not in the order of which I want it to be, so hang with me while here. So we're gonna go right into breakout rooms, but before we do, I'm just gonna give you guys sort of a little assignment. And so when we get into breakout rooms, I want you to talk about, so this is a house, talk about who and what you connected with as a young person in your neighborhood, in your home, in your school, in activities that you're involved in. So sort of paint a picture of what that looked like for you as a young person. And so I want you guys to have a conversation about that in your breakout sessions, and then we're going to come back in a couple of minutes and talk about and connect that to resilience. Michelle, do you mind sending folks? Does everyone understand before we move into breakout sessions?
Yes.
Yeah, all right. Michelle, do you mind sending folks?
I am on it. People should have an invite to go into a breakout room.
Perfect, thank you. So does anyone want to share what they talked about in their breakout sessions? Who was present for them in their lives? We had a really great discussion with some people in my breakout sessions who had some serious tragedy when they were younger, and could identify a couple of factors that I think were really important. Does anyone else want to share?
Do you want me to go first, Kristen?
That would be great, Diane, thank you.
Okay, so in that group, we talked, well, I shared that I was very involved with school, with sports, with horseback riding. I did all that. I lost my mom when I was 12 years old. She went to work one day. I never saw her again because she passed away from a heart attack. I was really much a mama's girl. So it was pretty traumatic to me at that time. But, you know, I was very fortunate that I had some close people in my life. I mean, I remember, like, I think I was in 6th grade when she passed away. So I think it was 6th or 7th grade that we had a mother-daughter basketball game, and I had to have somebody, so I wouldn't have had anybody to go with me, but a family friend came in and took my mother's spot so I could play in that mother-daughter game. So that was really remarkable. And I've done a lot of thinking about resiliency and I had a good foundation. My mother was a great role model, all that. It was great. So I think that helped a lot. I lived with my dad from the time I was 12 to 16. He passed away when I was 16. So it was a lot of 2 heart attacks. That's why I've never smoked a cigarette in my life, because I'm not going to take a chance on my heart. So that's kind of resilient. So I don't know. Sometimes I think I can make it through just about anything because I've made it through a lot of tough times in my life. You know, and it seems like it just keeps coming sometimes. But anyway, I think that helps.
And I think you shared some really great points, like that, you know, sort of that strong foundation, right. How important having that strong building block foundation is. Having people in your life who can support you when something happens. You know, science says, or research says over and over again that it's one caring adult, right, who steps in, who can build our resilience and help us connect. And I think the other thing that you talk about is that growth mindset, right? Like that once you have been through something, you feel like you can do it again, right? So
Right.
having that internal conversation about, I can do this, right? Like this doesn't seem overwhelming because I've done it before and I can do it again. So there's hope that, right, you can move through that. Anyone else have anything they want to share?
I can go, Kristen. We talked a lot in our group about like it takes a village to raise a child mentality. A lot of us had different people around the community and our neighborhood and our family, extended family that were there. You know, different family members to be sounding boards for, you know, just whatever came up as a kid, and just to have that support.
And I'm sure that if everyone shared, right, that probably is a similar conversation that happened in every breakout room. So I don't want to take too much time because what Michelle is going to talk about is super important. I do want to show this very short video. Hold on. About the resilience scale. Has anyone seen this? And I'll be right. All right, let me share my, can you guys see that?
No.
Okay, I'm gonna go back to share screen. Can everyone hear it?
We cannot, Kristen. If you go up to the options, you can do the sound share. Do you know what I'm talking about? At the top, go to options and it should say share computer sound as one of the options.
I know how to do this, but I can't. Hold on.
Do you have it, Kristen? Do you know what I'm talking about? If you go up to the bar on the very top from the screen share, like the little green bar.
Yeah. There is not share computer stuff. Okay. Let me screen share again. Thank you for bearing with me.
I think you're still on the screen
okay.
share. Yeah.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
And now just press play.
Now everyone can hear it.
Yes. Good. We're good.
You can think of a child's development as a scale that has two sides. A child's scale is placed in a community and has spaces on either side where experiences and environmental influences stack up over the course of development. One side gets stacked with negative factors like stress, violence, and neglect, while the other side gets loaded with positive factors like supportive relationships, skill-building opportunities, and community resources. In the same way that the weight on a teeter-totter affects the direction it tips, the factors that a child is exposed to affect how they turn out, the outcomes of their development. But the way that the scale tips and the outcomes a child experiences is also a function of the position of the scale's fulcrum, which is like the genetic makeup of the child. The position of the fulcrum affects how the scale responds to factors that get stacked on either side and how easily it tips. We know that fulcrum starts in different places for different children, and that this genetic starting point is an important factor in how a child responds to experiences and how they turn out. We also know that the position of the fulcrum isn't fixed. It's a sliding set point. Over time, the things that load and tip the scale can actually shift the position of the fulcrum. There are points in human development when this fulcrum is easier to shift. During these shiftable periods, our biology can be changed, making us more or less able to withstand negative weight that gets stacked on the scale. One of these shiftable periods is early childhood, and another is adolescence. That's why it's so important to make sure that children have positive experiences, especially early on, and to continue positive supports throughout development. By providing positive experiences during these sensitive periods of development and offloading negative weight, we can shift the fulcrum, making children more able to bear the weight of negative experiences later on, making them more resilient. So resilience isn't just about individual children. It's about the environments and experiences that get stacked on their resilience scale. Resilient societies are those that figure out how to stack more positives than negatives onto the children that will become workers and citizens.
Anyone seen that before? Yeah, some people say yes, some people say no. What I appreciate about it, does anyone have any thoughts, first of all? What I appreciate about that video is, I think the conversation about the fulcrum and genetics, but also that it's the environment, right? Like if we as providers, and this is going to transition into Michelle, I think, constantly having the conversation with ourselves and within our sort of professional social circles about what we do to increase opportunities for connection and resilience with the families that we work with the individuals we work with, because that is sort of what shifts, not just genetics, but where that fulcrum moves as a young person sort of navigates through life. So we could have this conversation about resilience that could go on. Like, I think we could have a series just about resilience, and maybe that's a good idea. But I want Michelle to be able to talk about the intersection between substance use, mental health, and domestic violence. Then if we have time, we can come back.
Awesome. Sounds good. Did anyone have any questions for Kristen before we move on? Any burning questions, or you can put them in the chat too. And I don't know about anyone else, but on my end, it was a little glitchy. So we'll send the link to that video too in the, when we send the email the follow-up email. So yeah, I'm going to take it away with that intersection between domestic violence and substance abuse and mental health. So for folks, this is an opportunity to share too. And what ways have you seen domestic abuse intersect with mental health or substance use disorders? And again, I'll say this is being recorded, so only share what you can depersonalize it, talk in generalities, but what ways have you seen this in your life or work, or yeah, what would you like to share?
For me, I've seen a lot of PTSD caused by a lot of this, and a lot of people self-medicating, of course, with the substance use. And then on top of that, a lot of the abuse or abusers using that substance, to their own aid, I guess.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all of those things. That is a great taking off point. So we will take that and run with it. Because we're going to talk about all of those things. So, and again, this is just like a little taste of this, talking about this in, 40 minutes or so. is just a glimpse. And if people want to talk more about this, there we do have a mental health or a domestic violence training for mental health providers. That is a 12-hour, so a 2-day training. And so yeah, I can send you information about that if you're interested as well. But this is just going to skim the surface. The first thing I want to say is that, you know, abuse is a choice. You know, battering or coercive control is based on a belief system that someone has the right to treat their partner that way. You know, people, we hear from survivors, we hear from people who use violence, like, oh, it was because of alcohol, it was because of mental illness, but we know that it's a choice that people are making. You know, there are very few cases where it is due to a pathological issue, and maybe like in those rare cases, if you take away the substance use, the violence goes away. But more often than not, you know, that belief system is there. You know, you can see it as like a fire that's burning. And when you add substances, it makes it worse. It makes it more dangerous. It makes, you know, people do things that maybe they wouldn't have done when they were sober. But at the base of that is that foundational belief system that they have the right to do this. We do also see when survivors fight back against their abusive partners, there may have been a substance involved. Maybe they would not have fought back without that substance being there. So again, I'm not condoning their use of violence, but you know, we do see that that happens sometimes. So this, you know, substances can affect us all in many ways, but we know that a substance does not make you use violence. I'm sure lots of people in this, you know, webinar have drank before or used a substance without, you know, being abusive to their partner. So just want to maintain that, you know, people who are using violence or using abuse, it is a choice that they're making above and beyond the substance. And so with that, you know, we like, and I don't know who had shared it, but yes, when people are experiencing abuse, it gives them, you know, it really increases the risk for developing depression, PTSD, anxiety, you know, all kinds of mental health disorders can come up because of that. And then substance use, you know, we know that people try to cope in many different ways, and that could be substance use, or it could be an eating disorder, or it could be self-harm. You know, people are just trying to get through the day, and so some of these things they may find help them get through the day. We know that suicide risks are increased. You know, when we looked at that risk analysis at the beginning, you know, suicide, you know, all of these things were listed on both sides of that risk analysis. We know that, you know, when you are currently with an abusive partner, these are risks, and even after you leave, these are risks. So just being aware of that too when you're working with folks who may have, you know, they may present with some of these things, that there may be an underlying cause that is domestic abuse. So you may see, and you know, and it may not be. So this is where, you know, being curious and asking questions, because it's like, you know, you may see that there's abuse, and then you see that there are these things, or you may see, you know, these diagnoses, these different things that people are struggling with, and then find out that the underlying cause is abuse. And sometimes for some people, you know, as soon as they're, you know, in a healthy, safe place, you know, these things may go away. But for other people, these things continue. You know, we talk about like PTSD, but for a lot of people,
biggest brain part. Huh? The biggest brain part. I'm just standing there.
oh, and I think someone is not muted. Goodness, I wonder if everyone can mute themselves. Okay, so for some people who, you know, when, even though like you may think, oh, well, they're not in that relationship anymore, but oftentimes things are still happening. You know, there's often ongoing violence, and also just the threat of violence. Like people who are not with their abusive partner may still constantly be looking over their shoulder, worried about what's going to happen. And so what we see as maybe being paranoia could be a logical response to ongoing abuse, ongoing stalking, you know, all of these other things that someone may be experiencing. So it's really important to, you know, step back and take a look at all the things that are going on for someone, because we may not know. And that's where, you know, being curious and asking questions about, you know, like, so tell me more about what's going on. And I don't know the positions that people have in here, if they're mental health providers or, you know, providers with childcare places. So, you know, I know we can't do all the things, and this is where, you know, working as a collaborative community response is important, you know, just seeing what people need for support and how to connect them. Does anyone have any questions so far? And I think there might be someone in the chat box. Okay, that's okay. Are there any questions or thoughts so far about this slide or anything I've said so far? Okay, just chime in, or if if anyone has anything, just jump in. So when we look at the traumatic effects of abuse and coercive of control, we see that there are often high rates of substance use disorder for women and for people who have been battered. This slide is gendered, but we know abuse affects people. If someone is being abused, people try to cope with that. And so self-medication is common. And then also, we find that people who, and this is a gendered statement based on, the research that has been done, men are more often introduced to substances by other men, where women are often introduced by their partners. And so that, they may be, that may be part of the relationship, if their relationship is using and then they get their partner to use, and then that can be used against them if there's abuse. You have the substance abuse power and control wheel that I sent out. And so there are so many ways that someone's partner can use abuse against them. Go ahead and call the police, you're using, and I'm going to tell them. Or you sold, they may make their partner sell drugs and then be like, go ahead and call, I'm going to tell them that you sold drugs. This can happen in so many ways. Or if you threaten to leave me, I'm going to call DHHS and tell them you're using. This can look so many different ways. And it's really like, it creates a really hard situation for someone who wants to then get help or change their situation, because this is constantly hanging over them. And when we think about the societal stigma that comes along with substance use, that can be used against people too, that constant shame that they're experiencing. There's often already so much shame and guilt around abuse, but then when you add on the layer that comes with using substances, it makes it a really hard situation for folks. And then even like when people try to get safety, thinking about like, this is a small community here in rural Maine, and other people may be able to relate where they are, but like if you're going to AA or NA, there's only so many places to go. So then your partner knows where you are. Or there may be someone else knowing that there's a vulnerable person that they can, then also go after. I feel like we hear a lot about, there's that stereotype, or we hear people say like, oh, they just keep dating the wrong kind of people. But like, if you're only exposed to, people in a certain place, that, people, different communities have belief systems, and that's like a cultural thing. And so, in order to find people with a different belief system, that could be part of it too. I feel like, you're fishing in the same pond. It's a small community. And so that could be part of it too. So please, like, don't blame the survivor for dating a certain kind of person when, that person may be targeting them because of vulnerabilities, because they are able to control them. So just try not to victim blame, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And then when you look at that power and control wheel, was there anything, I don't know if people got a chance to review that before coming in today. And I can put it up on the screen. And again, acknowledging that it is gendered, this was done based on women's experiences. Does anything stand out to people when looking at this document? And that's okay if people don't have thoughts on it. This tool can be really helpful when working with people who have these experiences. It can be very validating for them. It's a challenging thing because of the stigma that already exists. And I think about this a lot with people who are trafficked too. Drugs are so related to that and so interconnected. And, so again, we may see people who are experiencing substance use and coming to us for help with that, but knowing that there's this underlying thing. I think of, the people who go to their therapist because of OUI, they got an OUI, they have to do the DEEP program, and then it comes out with them that, they're actually in a relationship where they're being abused by their partner, and that's the underlying cause. And so that's part of why this mental health training came about, was it's an opportunity to talk about this. There's a huge opportunity.
Can I ask you this? Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
this question that's in the chat.
Yeah,
So
please.
someone asked if there's any information regarding local workplace policies, knowing that TV behavior is a controlling and controlled behavior dynamic. Workplace policies that are punitive for offenses could be highly effective. Are there models of good policies that could be provided to interested parties?
Yes, that is such a great question. And I appreciate that so much, because workplace policies are something that we're going to be working on more with people, because we should be talking about this in the workplace, right? People should know that their workplace is going to be there to support them if this is what's going on. When we think about this, it's a safety issue. You know, workplaces have safety policies all around for other things. And so, you know, that is just what this is. It's, you know, creating another safety policy. So if people want to reach out to me, we can help them create a workplace domestic abuse policy and do trainings with, you know, staff that want to be the first responders to those folks, and also to, you know, just let people know, you know, this is what abuse looks like, you know, and this is how your workplace can support you. And they can put in policies for, you know, if people are experiencing abuse, and then what it looks like if someone's using abuse, you know, to take a stance and say, you know, and it's not to fire everyone, because that doesn't generally solve things for people, but to take an approach of like a very proactive approach where people know they can reach out to their workplace, you know, they can put things in place to be safe at their workplace, and, you know, what that support looks like. That's a great question. I'm so glad someone asked, because, you know, we're all in this community, and when people feel like they can't come forward with this and that it is something they have to hide, you know, how many people end up having to quit their job or lose their jobs because of what's going on at home? You know, that's so common. So it really does keep that door open and really creates a supportive environment. So that's a really great question. Thank you so much. Are there any other questions or thoughts around that? Okay, I'm going to share my screen again. And then we have a quote here from a survivor. You know, when I was using, I didn't have the ability to reach out for help, nor did I feel I needed it. Not using made me feel again. And when I felt again, I knew I needed help because the pain was there. And that's when I reached out for help with the violence. If I had continued using, I would have never reached out. And that's a really hard thing. I feel like it's like a chicken and an egg. Some people need to get sober to realize like, oh my gosh, things are not okay. And other people need the violence to stop so that they can get sober and clean. Like, I mean, it's like a catch-22 of, you know, and so everyone's life is going to be different. So meeting people where they're at with like what they need support with. And this again goes back to that collaborative community response, you know, connecting people, being there for them wherever they're at so that they can get what they need and in the order they need it in. Because, you know, the way we talk about substances, the way we talk about abuse, it's very intertwined, and I feel like it's a shame spiral. Even the language, I know clean, that is a word that is not really helpful. So I apologize for using that, but it's, you know, it's very intertwined. It's like the chicken and the egg. So being able to be there for people in whatever way they need us to be, and really meeting them where they're at. It's really important. This is part of why we created our Somerset shelter. You know, we realized people would come into shelter and would end up leaving because of using substances and, you know, having a safety issue or whatnot. And then so they'd be asked to leave, and we're like, you know, so many people are returning to violence because of substances. And so we created our shelter to be, you know, working collaboratively with a local organization to help people with recovery. And in both of our shelters, we help people, you know, with whatever resources they need. And then looking at, you know, this is one of our slides from the mental health training too, of like, you know, looking at the left, you know, people are always making attempts to stop the abuse. We may not see that, you know, I feel like it's like a duck on the top of the water, you know, they look like they're just bobbing around and okay, but underwater they may be paddling and paddling, like trying to stay 5 steps ahead of their abusive partner, like trying to fix things, trying to prevent abuse, you know, that may be trying to reason with them, appearing passive, looking like they're doing nothing. Like, I think that's a common thing that people think, oh, they aren't doing anything about this, when the reality is they're doing 20 things to try to stay safe at all times, which is exhausting. You know, that's a lot of work people are doing on an ongoing basis. But then also there are attempts, you know, to cope with the abuse or to get through it. And so some of those things, you know, maybe disassociation, avoidance, self-medication, self-injury. You know, when I think of these things like disassociation, that works to get through the abuse, but then, and, you know, and self-medication, but then in other parts of life, like when you're at court, if you disassociate, you know, that does not fare well for you. And so these coping mechanisms that people use to get through this stressful situation at home, when people use that in other contexts, it doesn't help. And so really having some compassion for that, because, you know, those pathways in the brain get formed and they're what people use to survive abuse, but they don't help in survival in other aspects of life. So even though people may appear to be safe, maybe they're at shelter, maybe they're someplace else, but their brain still goes back to those reactions. And this isn't for everyone, but for some people, that might be what's going on. So it's really important to just, you know, be present with people with what's going on and help them process and help them, you know, get the support that they need to be safe. It's a, you know, there's such a bigger picture of what's going on for them. And the good thing about like those brain pathways is that they can be reformed, right? There's neuroplasticity, which, you know, there's a video I'll email you too about that, because you know, these things form to keep us safe, but they can change to help us in other ways. Any thoughts or comments on that? This format's always hard for me because I'm a conversation person. I don't like just talking at people.
I think talking about the neuroplasticity and how those pathways happen across the lifespan is so important. Thank you for mentioning that, Michelle.
Yeah, and I'll send the video. It's wonderful. I should have built it in. And then, so remembering, and I think I responded to these earlier, you know, trauma is not necessarily post. You know, I see people, you know, they'll hear that I'm working here and they'll be like, this was my life and it's not over. You know, it was 10 years ago, but I still am always looking over my shoulder. I'm still processing these things, or still worried that my, you know, partner's gonna come. So knowing that, you know, these things are still current for people, for many people, for many different reasons. And these symptoms can be the appropriate response to ongoing danger. Paranoia is the one I think of, but stalking, like when people are being stalked, when their partner's showing up in all of these places, you know, it's stalking them online, you know, always there, that does something to a person, you know? And so understanding, you know, this may sound like paranoia, but what is the bigger picture? What is going on for this person? And are they overreacting or just trying to survive the day? I think of that too with people who say, oh, they're just in denial, or, you know, is it like, are they in denial or are they surviving? You know, they're still here. These things are, you know, working for them. I say working in quotes, but like it is working. They're still here. You know, and that is something. So being able to acknowledge that too. And it sort of takes the pressure off you too, because like they have made it this far without me. I think as providers, we can feel an urgency too of like, we need to get in and do these things. And we do need to be available and present for people, but these, you know, folks have survived without us thus far. And now we can just be something, you know, a step up for them, you know, just a support for them. It's not all on us as individuals. And I also want to say, check your biases. You know, people know how you're feeling. Survivors who have experienced abuse are often very aware of facial expressions, very aware of how you're feeling, even if you may not know you're feeling that way. You know, I talked about that with kids last time. Adults are the same way. You know, that's been a part of safety. And so if you are not acting genuine, if you are not trusting what they're saying, they are not going to trust you either. So being able to be honest, being able to, you know, understand your feelings around people, maybe with mental health issues or substance use, you know, being able to get clinical supervision around your thoughts and your feelings and your biases are so important in order to like maintain, build a healthy relationship with a survivor, because it's going to be written all over your face if you don't trust them or believe them or frustrated with them, so get the support that you need so that you can support people too. And know that supporting that parent is supporting that child. It's creating a bridge for them. So when you're working with someone, be patient with them, listen and validate their experience. You may not understand something that's going on. And so being able to ask questions like, tell me more about that. Being able to voice concern for their safety is okay. It's okay to do that and say, I'm really worried about you. How can I support you? And support people's decisions. We can't write people off because they're making a decision. We can't say that we aren't going to serve them because they're making a decision that's going to burn that bridge and not going to help them. And just being non-judgmental about what's going on in their life and the choices that they're making. And ask people what they need for support, keeping safety in mind. What do they need to be safe? What does that look like, and what are the resources that are there? You can reach out to us. You can reach out to us as a provider if you're needing to process something and, just really go over what's going on, or your local resource center, and definitely, giving them our information as well. And just take care of yourself and seek supervision around that as well. And I have our resources here, which I know we've talked about many times. I will say we are going to have a support group starting virtually in December. So that's really exciting. We've done a lot of work to try to make that safe. As we know, stalking through technology happens a lot. So we are working to make that be an option for people and a safe option. And knowing that's open, our services are available to everyone, regardless of gender, identity, regardless of orientation, financial status, all those things. We're here for everyone. I feel like I flew through that, trying to be mindful of time, but are there any questions that people have? Anything, what's come up for people in this conversation?
I have a question for you. I'm actually not from Maine, I'm from Tennessee, but I work at a shelter, a domestic violence shelter, and my question is just regarding your support group that you just talked about. I know that has nothing to do with this PowerPoint, but you intrigued me. Could you either maybe could I personally email you, or you can maybe just tell me a little bit about how you're keeping that safety, because we are trying to also do that, but we're also fear that abusers are, taking part in that.
Right. And that is, I do not know the inner workings of that. I know, we do meet with people beforehand over the phone and talk about the different safety and confidentiality aspects, and sort of just try to make a rigorous safety plan with them around that. So if you want to email me, and I can definitely check into more of those things, I'm happy to, because it is an ongoing challenge. And with COVID, making isolation is such a problem already. And especially when we think about substance use and mental health, it is so, isolation is like a foundational thing for all of these, problems that people have. We need connection to, as a preventative thing. So getting the virtual support group is a part of breaking that isolation. But yeah, how do we do it safely? How do we do that if they're, currently in a relationship with an abusive partner, and it may be making a safety plan to go to their library and be in the parking lot using the Wi-Fi. It can look other ways, maybe going to a friend's house so that they can watch their kids and they can use their friend's device to call in, keeping their phone in the other room. It may look many different ways, but we work with people as individuals to make that safety plan, because what works for one person may not work for someone else.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question. And thanks for joining from Tennessee. Do other people have questions? And, we work really closely with local providers as well to, support people in connecting, because again, the collaborative community response, we can't do this alone. We need, the other local agencies. That's part of what the mental health training came from, was, the homicide review panel saw, that people who had been killed by their partner, some of them did have a mental health provider and weren't getting that, you know, they saw an opportunity there of like, we need more people to understand these bigger issues that are happening. So that is where that 12-hour training came from. So if anyone's interested in that too, I can give you that information.
Michelle, I'm glad you said that too, because my wife would be mad if I didn't say that the new report from the Homicide Review Panel is about to come out, actually, and like there's a lot of suggestions and things in that report that really can drive community networking, and because what you're saying, and it keeps making me think, like, who overarches, who brings everybody together in the community to ensure that these things are happening, like workplace policies on both ends, supporting both ends of the spectrum. And then things like, you know, making sure that ride-alongs can happen, or, you know, with the PD, if that's possible, with some kind of DV support group. You know, things like educating about free rights, about PFAs and PFHs in the community, so people know that they have rights and access to those rights. But like, who does that? Who facilitates? I know that's too much work for one person to do. So I guess my question would be, is there anybody that's in a position to facilitate that kind of networking in the community amongst all those partners to truly be effective?
Well, and that's where like our domestic violence task force comes in. The Maine Coalition to End Domestic Violence, you know, works hard with advertising stuff. And that is something that we're like, I've been trying to figure out too, like in our agency, how do we reach the people who we aren't reaching? Because obviously that's happening. You know, people aren't always aware of our resources, or if they're able to call or have like, you know, they don't know that we're not going to tell them what to do. And so people having that understanding, because they may have assumptions about who we are and what we do, and they're just going to tell me to leave. They're just going to tell me to do this. They're just going to tell me to do that. And so creating, you know, bringing that awareness about that, like, you know, we're here as a, you know, non-biased, non-judgmental support, and we won't tell people what to do, and it's confidential, you know, except for in the case of mandated reporting. And, you know, just really trying to get the word out about all of these things to everyone in the community, so that we do talk about it more too, because I feel like that's a big struggle. You know, it's something that we don't talk about. We brush it under the rug, we pretend it's not happening, when it is happening. It's happening to our neighbors, it's happening to our family members, it's happening to a lot of people, it's happening to us. You know, this is something that affects all of us. And so having conversations like this is so important. So I encourage people, you know, talk about this with your friends, talk about, you know, are you feeling safe? You know, reach out and ask them, and know that we're here for support.
There are a couple things I was thinking about resilience when you're talking, and I wanted to say something, but my dogs erupted in barking. So, but I think about, you know, how, like, I think about community providers building resilience, or connecting with people through resilience. And I think a couple of things you said, that, you know, recognizing that survivors have survived prior to connecting with us, right? Like that and recognizing that and helping them recognize, like, you know, that's being resilient, right? And I think we talked about this, or Saray talked about this, that, you know, we have to look at resilience outside of the box, right? Like sometimes we have this very sort of cookie cutter idea of what resilience looks like, and it doesn't always look like that. And I think the other piece, you know, is you talked about allowing people to make their own decisions, right? Like that builds resilience for people, like being able to, you know, help people identify what is the right decision for them. Gives that space for building resilience and helping people become more resilient. So thank you for those two things. And, you know, just because before you started talking, you know, I think that really needs to be a larger conversation about community providers creating a more resilient community, right? Like how can we help people or connect with people through resilience? So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. And really just, I mean, not writing people off and making assumptions. You know, we know that people are going through a lot, and what they need to do to survive is, you know, what they're doing. And so really meeting them where they're at. And I know that's like an overused phrase, but it's really the truth, because we don't know what's happening for people. And until we, you know, are there honestly and present, you know, with them, you know, it's hard to trust when your partner, this person who you're supposed to be able to love and trust, is, you know, doing things to you. It makes it hard to trust other people too. And they're telling you things. And so, you know, you believe them, and they may be using, you know, your mental health diagnoses against you. You know, I'm going to tell DHHS, you know, in that role play we did, I think in the first one, you know, that was part of that of, you know, I'm going to call DHHS, tell them about your substance use, tell them about your prescription. You know, they may sell your prescription, and then what do you do then? Because you're having, you know, you need that for your mental health maintenance, but how do you tell your provider who may have been your last chance? You know, I think about that with, it's, you know, so many providers, you know, and for reasons around insurance and payment, you know, they may have these policies, but when people lose that provider because of a policy, that might be a lifeline that they have just lost. So having flexibility around that in your agency about, you know, no shows or cancellations, because, you know, if someone is juggling a million things and, you know, struggling in all these ways, and maybe they have a traumatic brain injury, maybe there's all these other things too, it's easy to miss an appointment, and that could be a lifeline. You know, their partner may not be letting them do that. They may have thrown their keys in the woods so they couldn't go to that appointment. You know, who knows? And just with COVID, it's all that much worse. So please, you know, having patience with people and really, you know, asking more questions in a, you know, kind way to be like, tell me more about what's really going on, because, you know, we're here for you. Any other thoughts or questions? I know we're right about time. We did send an email out about, we're working on a 5th session if people want like just a question and answer session. Don't know if people would be into that, and they can, you know, send us questions in advance through like the Survey Monkey. You know, because again, discussion, we like discussion, we're discussion people. We want it to be, you know, we like that kind of interaction. So would people be interested in that? Is that something, you know, a community discussion about, I don't know, any questions you have?
Yes, what did you say about offering 12 hours of a course on domestic violence and mental health?
Yeah,
a
so
2-day?
Mental health providers are, for their licensure, are required 12 hours. And so that is a training that we've done in person and has just been adapted for online. So we're looking at offering one of those in January or February. So I can if you want to put your email in the chat, I will make sure you're on that list to get that information.
Okay, that would be great. I appreciate that. Because sometimes with our agency, we're having challenges getting the trainings that we need. Right. So it would be approved if it were through you, so your agency. So great, thank you very much.
Wonderful, yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
Well, if there's
the other thing I want to mention is, oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
It's like the Zoom, like, no one knows when to talk. So this doesn't have to do with domestic violence, although, so December 15th at 12:15, we are starting, this is the first in a series of conversations called Substance Use in Families, or Substance Use in Communities Supporting Families Through the Lifespan. So we're having a conversation similar to this. We're inviting Kelly Bowden, who works for Maine Medical Center and with prenatal moms who are using substances. And so she is going to talk about sort of what that looks like prior to like when a mom is pregnant and then at birth and then following. So we're excited to have her. I can send out the Zoom link to folks who registered through this workshop, or the information about it if people want to register. But that's Tuesday, December 15th at 12:15. So I just wanted to do a little plug for that before we get off the Zoom.
Awesome, thank you, Kristen. And thank you everyone so much for being part of the conversation. I think this was really good.